two things, which is one, great, it's possible we don't have to be that way. Miss Debbie, we don't have to be violent and angry and full of resentment and disappointed. We don't have to be that way. Well, so that's exciting, but the other side is we can be overcome and be exactly that way. And so we took that, we jumped down and said, okay, we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to live in this idea, in this way, in this whatever this good is. We're supposed to overcome this evil with good. So let's get the Bible's definition. What did Paul write right here to tell us what this good looks like? And these are kind of statements that get me in trouble. Brother Moore, it doesn't matter what we think is going to keep us from being overcome of evil. Because truly, we've gone through here, and I don't know how long, we've probably spent 10, 12 weeks. But there's been people sitting in this audience who heard this lesson and said, yeah, but I don't have to be that way because I've got all these little check marks. I've got my little rules that are going to keep me from being overcome. These are my good. So one of the things that we dealt with are you wise in your own eyes? Are you building your own little lesson that's going to keep you? Because here's the fact. If this is not our life, then we're going to be overcome by the evil. It's going to find its way in there. It's going to leave its stamp on our life. So this is who and what and how we're supposed to be. And we got this picture, and we're going to read over them. I'm going to try to do this quick because we need to get back to the lesson we didn't finish last week. But it starts with this whole idea, and I want you to pay attention to all the themes of love and help and kindness. This is not a list of do to people like you've been done. This is a list of this is a way of living that is do good. And it begins with how do you do good? Well, you do good because you genuinely love. And right there's an issue. But I'm very careful not to ever, I try to be very careful. Sometimes that's the wrong way. But I try to be very careful to never build a list of, okay, this will do it. Because that's what we'll do. We like lists. Lists are things I can control. Okay, but this is something I can't control. Furthermore, I can't make myself genuinely do it. Okay, love is of God. And it's like a couple years ago they came out with those 3D TVs. The only way you could see everything on there is if you put on the 3D glasses. And it's like the 50s. So that one red side and one blue side. They tried to hide it, but really that's what you had. You just had the colors. And up there you had a green side. And you put them on. Well, if we're going to genuinely love, we got to put on God's glasses and see people His way. Otherwise, it's just going to be a list, and we're going to make ourselves good from doing a list, and we won't genuinely love. So, Doug, I love that it begins with love, and that's where this whole picture starts. It starts with this idea that we must be genuine in our love. Verses 9 and 10, let our love be without dissimulation, let it be genuine. Verse 10, and then it talks about this one. We're going to be kindly affectionate. And that gets things going. That paints the picture. If we're going to overcome this evil, we need to be genuinely loving the world. And then it goes on, and it gives us verse 11. Verse 11, it talks about that we need to not be idle. We need to not be empty. We need to not just go through the motions of a list. Okay? Because this is something that's about fervency. It's about passion. We should passionately pursue study. We should passionately pursue prayer. Because, by the way, that's the red and the green in the glasses. Those two things help us see things differently. All right, His way is not our way. But, well, here's where I'm going to find His way, the way. And in prayer, those two things, they help me see people so I can genuinely love. But if those aren't part of my life, if I'm not fervently in study and fervently in prayer, I'm not going to be genuinely love. And then it's not going to show forth its practice in how I live. And it's not going to show forth in me being, pursuing in people. So He gives us, be loving, and then this isn't going to happen unless there's some real passion in your life. Verse 12, I know this is hard, so let me encourage you, keep your mind on the wedding day. That's encouraging the wedding day, all this engagement stuff you're going through. Keep your mind on the wedding day. That's the day that makes it worthwhile. That is what's going to give you the strength to to be patient and long-suffering and go through the trials that are here in this world. And when it gets too much, which is every day, the verse says, take it to the Lord in prayer. Take it and depend on him. And it goes on, and verse 13, distributing to the necessity of the saints. Okay? We need to help those who are in need. We need to help those who have less. We need to share. That's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. They go, Doug, you need to be caring for those who are needy. And usually that's the only side we pay attention to when we look at a verse like this. Well, let me tell you, here's the other side of that, and it's the side where most independent fundamental Baptist churches struggle. If you're going to help the person who's needy, you know what I have to be? Honest, open, and needy. But too often, I don't want to be any of those. I want to part my hair on the right or on the left or whatever side you're supposed to part it on, wear the white shirt and the red tie and the blue pants, and tell everyone everything's fine. And never be honest that I'm struggling, or this may not make sense, or I've got scars in my life that I'm trying to work through, and they're not always easy. You know, we're supposed to bear one another's burdens. The only way that can happen is if we're open and revealing about those burdens. But Hank, that requires us to be vulnerable. And if we're running around stomping on everything that's wrong, how am I going to be vulnerable and let you know that there's some wrong in here? You know, all I'm going to do with everything that's inside of me is block that off, hide that. Now I'm not walking in the light, open people. Now I'm living in hypocrisy. And this cycle just keeps going. We live 20 years in hypocrisy, never being open, never be real growth. We're just too busy putting up the wall saying everything's okay. So we spent some time there. Verse 15, rejoice with. We're supposed to really share life. We're supposed to get involved with people. Verse 16, and this we spent a couple weeks on. Be of the same mind. What mind is that? It's a humble mind. Guess what? Humble mind makes us approachable. Now there's no need for that hypocrisy. See, Miss Debbie, because you revealed every stupid thing you've ever done in life, and Jade enjoyed that tremendously. But maybe that's not it. Maybe you revealed every stupid thing Hank did in life. But still, Jade loved that. It's going to make it real. She's much more likely to be open and reveal things to others. She shows that perfect heart. So it paints this picture. There's some humility there. There's not this arrogance. There's not this perfection. And let me tell you, it's a big sign of arrogance is the person who needs nothing. Now, the arrogant need everything because they're blind as can be. But they come across as if they need nothing. I've got this. It's taken care of. It brings us up to verse 17. Recompense no man evil for evil. Because if you do, you just get in this cycle. You punch me, I punch you. We just keep punching until somebody dies. Now, as soon as somebody dies, somebody else is going to say, you killed somebody of mine, so let's go at it. And the killing just continues. And that brings us up to verses 18 and 19. Brings us back to this idea where last week we said, and here's the strange thing, that peace and wrath, they're linked together. And God ties them together for us right here in verses 18. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. There's the peace. Verse 19, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. There's the wrath. These two things tie together. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And let me just jump down to verse 20 before we catch back up to where we were. And verse 20 is often read, studied, preached from. Justin, it's usually preached from by itself. And very seldom is that a good thing. You know, we're the ones who always want to talk about in context and then read no context. But I'm going to tell you, verse 20 definitely needs the context of this passage. And oftentimes it doesn't come up. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. That usually comes across one of two ways. And I want to spend just a little time, and then we'll jump back. It usually comes across one of two ways. Doug, when I was growing up, it came across this way. I mean, I think for 20 years of my life, this is all I heard. You know that person that you're angry at, and that person that you have malice for, and that person you want to get their just just desserts. Well, this is how you get them smacked by God. You do nice things for them, and then by you doing nice things, it's going to pour hot coals on them, and that's how you make them get what they got coming. You don't do it yourself. God will do it for you as long as you're nice. I mean, I think that's all I ever heard. And then, and I think this was Johnny Pope, and I have since heard multiple sermons that come across this way. And then I heard, and it was here, so I believe it was Johnny Pope. Doug, you can shake your head if I'm wrong. This was wrong, this is right. Johnny Pope preached that heap coals of fire on their head, and that really was, they would come over, knock on the door, and this is the way of you being kind to them, because you would be giving them fire that they need to cook their food, or fire that they need to keep themselves warm, and that might very well be right. I haven't done my research to find out if that's exactly part of what was going on at that time, and that's how people shared the fire in a tin above the house, and they would carry it back and forth or in a clay pot. But see, what that does is that takes away the wrath of God in this passage. And if you remember last week, we talked a little bit about there's usually two ends of the spectrum, and people want to stay all wrath or all love. And if they're all love, they apologize for the wrath. If they're all wrath, they apologize for the love. Okay, this passage is talking about the wrath of God. And it's talking about you and I just need to genuinely love them. That's why we do good unto them, because we genuinely love them. And in our genuine love for them, know this, that if our love is not attractive and does not show forth the light of God, it does not bring them to the place of repentance, which is what our love wants for them. It wants the best for them, then God will make it right. Then God's justice is involved. You know what that should be? That should be a motivator, not for me to store up more malice. That should be a motivator for me to be as loving and pursuing and involved as possible. Because I don't want anyone to fall under the wrath of God, just like I don't. And He's made it possible. And so, this is one of those places where I'm not shooting at anybody. I'm just saying we got to keep this in context. In context, this passage is dealing with the wrath of God. And I'm not weakening the wrath of God. I'm telling you, these two things are tied, however. Wrath and peace are tied together. That being said, there's two things we want to do, and we have hopefully just enough time. One, we're going to throw out some thoughts on wrath, and then we're going to talk about this link a little bit at the end. So I need to pick up the pace. Wrath, we defined it. Wrath, God's resolute action in punishing sin. It's going to happen. Matt, what sin is winked at? Well, it says God doesn't wink at sin. What sin doesn't matter? What sin gets swept under the rug? No, that doesn't happen. But there is now, therefore, no condemnation. That doesn't mean it's swept under the rug. That means it was paid for. Okay, there's the love of God. Realize when we weaken the wrath of God, we weaken the love of God. God is resolute in punishing sin. He has total resolve. Evil will not stand. It does not go unpunished. Fact. Every time sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. So we got this picture of wrath. We went through just about, I think, 4 observations. So we're going to do these first. When we're talking about wrath, realize this. Wrath is God's wrath, not yours and mine wrath. So this is not, man's temper. This is not just blowing up. God's wrath includes His holiness. It includes His justice. It includes goodness. It includes love. God's wrath is God's wrath, not yours or mine. And when we talk about wrath, part of the problem with it, Brother Hamilton, is I think about wrath, and I think about the worst wrath I've ever seen in my life. And I try to apply that to God. Well, that's backwards. Okay, this isn't me applying man to God. This is me studying and understanding God, and God's wrath is God's wrath, not man's wrath. Second, remember this, God's wrath is provoked. Bill, God is love. Nowhere in the Bible are you going to find God is wrath. In fact, it's going to say, we provoke Him to wrath. This is not part of His character. This is something that happens in result of. And that's very important, because in result of, He's brought to wrath, He's still loving, He's still good, okay? He's still just, He's still true. All of those things are always going to be true, but he is provoked to wrath. Another we talked about is that he's slow to anger, he's slow to wrath. He's not willing that any should perish. This is why he's holding that door open. But rest assured, slow does not mean no. And all sin will be punished. The wrath of God will not stop. Verse 4, number 4, fourth observation, God's wrath is revealed now. See, here's one of those things we tend to get. We tend to get, all right, so he's holding back his wrath until, says who? I think sometimes we miss it. If we're talking about Rome here, which is where this was written, this is the group of people. Matt, let's see. They were greedy. They were selfish. They were consuming each other. They were living in terror. Who says that's not the wrath of God? In fact, Romans chapter 1 says 3 times, I gave you up, I gave you up, I gave you up. Okay, we live in a time that's full of anger and resentment and hate and hopelessness. Who says that's not the wrath of God? See, we see God's wrath right now because he gives you what you want. We ended last week with this. Yeah, this is where we ended. We ended last week with this picture. Okay, we live in a society it's like the man in the desert drinking sand trying to quench his thirst. We just keep chasing and chasing and chasing. Well, here's the wrath of God. What we're chasing will never bring what we want. We will consistently not have enough, be needy, and have that thirst. So God's wrath is revealed now. We can see it in the strife, in the envy. And that brings us to 5. So we got 2 more, and then we're going to try to apply this a little bit. Eric, give me Romans 2:5. There we go. Fifth observation about wrath is wrath is stored up. But after thy hardness and impotent heart, treasurest up unto thyself wrath. Isn't that a good thing? Matt, we get to store up we treasure it. Since we treasure living this way and we treasure self-control and we treasure chasing this sand, let me tell you what happens to this that we treasure. It's stored up. There will come a day that we will answer. In fact, treasurest up unto thyself wrath against the day of wrath. There's the day and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. There's coming a day. And on that day, every sin will be accounted for. Now, Doug, this is what happens. You bring a kid into the principal's office, and you start, I don't care if you have a picture of what happened. Look on this phone, Johnny. What do you see? Well, so-and-so made me. There's going to be an excuse. There's going to be a blame. There's going to be something why I don't need the discipline that's going to come from the principal's office. True? Well, on that day, we're going to be silent. There won't be any defense. Mouths are going to go because there's not going to be any arguing in dealing with the wrath of God at this point. So, 6, because I need to get to this. I want to get to this other part. Eric, give me John 3. 6th thing about God's wrath is, here's the good news. Because we all know why I keep doing this. That's because you don't look happy. It makes me nervous. There you go. Now we'll pick on Justin. God's wrath is for sinners. There is now, therefore, no condemnation. Why is that? Because all that wrath was poured out on the cross. That's the phrase the Bible uses over and over again. All the way back, it starts in Ezekiel. Now, you're known as being a smart guy. Do you know that? Say yes, or it's going to break the fact that you're a smart guy. You know that people say you're a smart guy. Go ahead. What about humility? Good grief. So if I give you a bucket of water, a pitcher water, that's a pitcher. That'd be a bucket. I give you a pitcher of water. We fill it up with water. If you pour it until there's none left in, that would be poured out, right? So if I turn it back up, what's left in there? And this is what I want you to hear. This is good. See, you can smile. His wrath was poured out at the cross. Nothing. That's why there's now therefore no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, because all of the wrath was poured out on him. All we have to do is choose to live in that love that was exampled for us on the cross. And there's nothing left. Some say, I don't want that. Realize what happens when you say, I don't want that. We're saying, I want the wrath on me. Bring it! Arrogance. So, just a few. Oh, let me do this. Let me give you both of these. He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life. He that believeth not on the Son of God shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. That word abideth. Mike, I'm sure you've studied this. That word abideth has with it this phrase of continuous. It abideth still. It's still there. You know what that means? That means, Justin, it's not waiting someday for the wrath of God to be on us. That's why God's wrath is revealed now. That's why we can see it now, when we're given up to our own. It means we're born under the wrath of God. So, I don't know. You're kind of like making a whole lot out of that word. Okay, Ephesians 2, verse 3. And the preacher quoted this, I believe, last week. You have me Ephesians 2:3? Among whom also we all had our conversation in times past in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath. That's how we were born. We were born already under wrath. God's wrath is for all sinners. And we're all born sinners. But his wrath was poured out at the cross. And if we would enter in and live in that love, which was exampled on the cross, then for us, there is now therefore no condemnation. But does that mean I can do whatever I want to do? No, let me tell you. There's this cycle of sin. Sin, when it is finished, every time, bring forth death. We are given over to the consequences of our sin just the same, just not the penalty, just not the wrath. Just remember last week I said, if we limit wrath, we limit his love. And this, can't do this. Now let me tell you this. I'm going to run out of time. Let me do this. This is usually, all right, we step outside of the church, big word, church, big church. We step outside of the church. Brother Mike, then we attack the wrath. We, being outside the church, we attack the wrath this way. How can a loving God be wrath? You know, and it's one way or the other. Okay, we spent some time last week. We're not talking about that. But inside the church, inside religion, Christendom, okay, this is usually how we attack the idea of wrath. We go in and we make God's wrath a moral agent. Okay, see, it goes this way. But Mike, see, it's not God's wrath per se. It's the cycle of. Let's see if we can do this. You reap what you sow. So that's biblical. So it's not God's wrath. It's you reap what you sow. This is what happens when you take things out of context. So what we're talking about here is, you know, if you sow bad, you're going to reap bad, and that's what's happening. It's not God's wrath. And Doug, if you spend a lot of time in there, you can create enough smoke and mirrors. That almost makes sense. In fact, when I was really young, I used to almost try to apologize for the God too. Because I wanted people to hear me. I wanted my friends to listen. But you can't. There is no apologizing for the wrath of God. It's God's wrath. See, here's the problem with this. If it's the result of living in a moral universe, so if you do bad, you get bad, well, explain to me the thief on the cross. He's the answer for so many things. God was so wise to giving us the thief on the cross. Okay, why was he on the cross? He did bad things. And what was the answer? You've done bad things, but you're going to be with me in paradise. Now, how does that make sense without talking about love, cross, wrath? It's not the result of living in a moral universe. The thief provoked God to wrath. God's love gave mercy and grace, and it provided peace. And so he woke up in paradise. That ought to be glory. Hallelujah. A few snapshot looks at wrath. But now what I want to do is I want to try to tie peace and wrath together. Verse 18, a call to peace. Verse 19 talks about wrath. And here I want to look at God's wrath and our peace with others, which is what it says. Let me do this. When you need to come up with an illustration, I always use the boys. What can they do? Eric, if you get mad, no inheritance. It's not so, well, no, that's not, I was about to say it's not so much now, but it's still very much now. But it's easier to picture when they were younger. Okay, when they were younger, let's say all three of them came home and they knew they were supposed to clean up the kitchen. But they didn't. And I get home from work. Well, that bed's better be clean before mom gets home. Whatever. I mean, the only thing I care about, mom's happy when mom gets home. So boom, you're all right. You're not in trouble now, but you guys got 1 hour to get this thing done. There's the whole speech. To which Jonathan, because he's here, Jonathan says, Dad, I have 4 hours worth of homework. So, Jonathan, at the table right now, don't lift your eyes up from that book until it's all done. Now, you know what his two brothers are going to go? But he should have to help us too, and now we have to do more in the kitchen, and that sounds silly, right? It doesn't sound silly, because some of you are right now in your head thinking, yeah, well, he probably should have had to, because, I just want you to understand that's how much we rationalize justice and malice. Everybody should get their just desserts. Nowhere in there are we called to make sure everybody gets their just desserts. That's God's job. And that's what we're about to talk to. That's not yours and mine. Yours and mine is to love and forgive and bring compassion and offer grace and mercy to help in time of need. But too often, somewhere on the inside of us, needs to be fair. I don't ever want fair. Because fair is me in heaven. Now, why do I want fair for someone else? Just to see that makes sense when we say it like that. But 30 seconds ago, you're like, well, should that boy really help with the kitchen first? I don't care. Sometimes he did have to help with the kitchen first. I don't care about that. I want you to see how big a struggle this is. It is a struggle for us to live vengeance is mine. Because we want it to be ours. And the call here is for as much as live possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. We're not supposed to be out there fighting back, and we're not supposed to be overcome with the evil of this world. I think that's what we had to spend the time talking about. Let our love be genuine. Be kindly affectionate. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation, because it's going to be tribulation. This is how we're supposed to be. How can we be that way? It's just not right. It's not right. How can I be that way? Well, here's how you leave it. You be that way. Verse 19. You leave the justice to God. That makes it possible. Okay, it's not my job. Not my job, man. Quit usurping God's job. Talk about arrogance. And he has a plan for this. Now, we're not going into that plan, but that plan starts in Romans 13, 3 and 4. Eric, give me 4. We'll walk through this real quick. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. It's talking about authority. Because, Brother Mike, see, here's his plan. God has a good plan. His plan. Not Eric and Josh's job to make sure Jonathan gets his just desserts. You know whose job that is? The authority God placed over him. Eric, I don't deal well with you usurping my authority. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath. Now, in every area, God has ordained authority. He's ordained government. He's ordained church. He's ordained home. He's even ordained the boss. But my boss is bad. Nero. If the boss is bad, guess who answers? Guess where the boss answers? To the one who ordained the authority. So where do we take our problem? To the one they answer to. Not to usurp it ourselves. This goes against the American ideal, by the way. In the American ideal, we make it all happen ourselves. We don't need God. In this picture, too. I don't know, we might get to read this. We got 7 minutes. In this picture, there is, I don't know what you're laughing for. You're the authority. That puts the pressure on you. And here's your guidance. An eye for an eye. What? Yeah. Who was it? It's Gandhi's famous for saying an eye for an eye makes the world go blind. Well, that's because you miss the idea of an eye for an eye. See, that's legislative. That's law. That's talking about proportionality. That means you don't slap somebody on the wrist who commits murder. And you don't throw someone in jail for life for speeding. You know what happens when proportionality is messed up? Well, then you don't trust the justice system to bring justice, and so you do it yourself. Or you think it's too harsh, and then you revolt. We kind of live through both of those things right now. But it's the importance that's placed. Now, here, I'm going to go so far. You ready, Matt? This is my opinion. I try to separate those things. This is my opinion. This is my opinion. I think this is what's happened. See, if we take God's wrath out of a society, we take God's wrath out of your home. Okay, I'm going to take God's wrath out of your mind. Got it. That doesn't take very much resistance. Take it out of your home now. Why are you going to discipline your kids? If God doesn't hold them accountable, why are you? You know, it kind of takes away our ability, our leg to stand on, so to speak. Well, we live in a country that has taken away God for so long. Where's the justice? How do we hold someone accountable? Well, he committed murder. But look at his upbringing. What chance did he have? 250 years ago, and since then for the last 250 years, and there was no, and he's been stuck in the cycle. And how are you going to take away God's wrath? Everything is just messy, relative. Ugh. He who argues best gets to make the decisions. And that's welcome to the society we live in. But I want you to understand, Brother Moyer, this society is a mess because we've taken away God's wrath. You need God's wrath for the peace. If there's wrath, if I'm going to be held accountable, I don't commit murder. If the penalty hurts me in the pocket, I probably would slow down. But when you take away the wrath, you take away the peace. So we have to understand, if there will be peace, we have to understand there will be retribution. And that retribution is proportional. Two things. I need to do this quick. So, one, understand there will be wrath, but then we got to remind ourselves. Cindy, we got to remind ourselves over and over again. I know. Maybe not you. John, you and I, we have to remind ourselves over and over again that it's not our job to break down the wrath. And I'm going to let me do this. Your daughters are going to thank me for this. Even when you're bringing the discipline, man, Brother Hank, will you repeat this so that when they get older, they'll like it? You're not supposed to discipline with your full force. It's proportional. But they made me mad. We provoked God. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for mercy and grace and full force. Two things real quick. One, Eric, give me Matthew 5, and we're just going to read through these. I don't think we'll have to say a whole lot. All right, see, he's ordained authority, and because he's ordained authority, it's not yours or mine to do. This is yours or mine to do. You've heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye. Oh, there you go. Look how things tie together. And a tooth for a tooth. Keep going. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whoso shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him to the other also. I don't like these verses. And if any man shall sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow thee, turn not away. We're supposed to let our love be genuine. We're supposed to bless them that curse you. Bless and curse not. And in so doing, Matt, we'll not be overcome of the evil. But when we usurp that and we put ourselves in that place, that evil just oozes in, and we become hateful and belligerent and hopeless and unhappy. We become just like the stench of the world, because the evil has creeped in. We're doing it the same. We're of the same mind, not the mind we're supposed to put on. The mind of Christ, the mind of humility, the mind of grace. And last, I got 3 verses. Yeah, let's do these. Give me Proverbs. Say not thou, I will recompense evil, but wait on the Lord. There we go. And he shall save thee. I think sometimes that means exactly that. That means we're waiting. Oh, that's so bad. No, it's not, because we genuinely love them. That waiting on the Lord. Okay, we're waiting for the wrath to come. You know what that is? Over and over again. Here, let me make it this way. That's an opportunity for you with genuine love to influence your grandkids. Now that waiting is a good thing, huh? Now if I made that waiting Nancy Pelosi, we don't want to wait. No, but we're waiting. The day of wrath is coming, it's sure. And that should motivate us along the way to a genuine love, to invest in people and make it real and show ourselves to be. Because if I be lifted up, here, 1 Peter. Jeremy, no, this is who we're supposed to be. This is what we're supposed to look like. Little Christ, who when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him who judgeth rightly. I'm waiting, but I'm about the loving, the investing, the caring. And it's a good thing, because Corinthians tells us that's what we've been tasked to do. To wit, that God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them, and hath committed unto us, made your and my job has tasked us, has made our responsibility the word of reconciliation.